Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Folks, welcome back to the show where sometimes we get our signals crossed, but our swords always are. It is the Crossing Swords podcast, and we are here to talk some Sabres as we continue to roll through the 2022-2023 season into mid-January here. And yeah, the Sabres have been scuffling, so let's get our crew in here to see what's going on and what the antidote is for this Sabres illness recently. Let's get it in here. We got Gatesy 35, and we got intern Vinnie. Gents, obviously, I mean, we have been talking about it all year on this podcast. Anywhere you look, it's pretty obvious. Sabres streaky this year. Again, there's been wins, there's been losses, but recently it's been more of the latter. 5 of the last 6. So with that said, let's kick it off. Do you see any major issues currently with the Sabres team?
I think one of the biggest things so far is, kind of the drop in scoring and the increase in goals coming against. I think in the last 6 games, the Sabres have only scored more than 3 or 4 goals once, and they've given up more than 4 in their last 8. Like, it's an absurd amount of, pucks coming into the Sabres net. And unfortunately, their secondary scoring kind of dried up in this past, 10 games now?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation for sure. And I think this is indicative of sort of the inexperience of the team in general, just not able to handle these big emotional swings. I think they just might need to calm down a little bit, but hopefully a night like tonight where they're going to have a lot of people in the building standing behind them, or at least hopefully standing behind them, that should be a good way to sort of get back in those winning ways and feel confident again.
Yeah, I mean, I love that it's Ryan Miller night tonight. I love that, the fans are obviously pumped up, as you can tell by the sellout and everything. With that said, just hate to be going on it after this last game where obviously you enter the third period against the Blackhawks with a 3-1 lead and can't close it out. So let's go with our tri-box here. Let's power it up. Ooh, we did a little shuffle. Okay, so we were just talking about the team's issues. So, you're Granato, you're GMKA. What is this current Sabres team's biggest issue at the moment, Gatesy?
I mean, right now, as in we're streak, it's that secondary scoring. You look back when this team was hot, yes, that first line was pumping out goals, but you had that second line of like Cousins, Quinn, Peterka, really firing on all cylinders, and what they're in the press box last week, and they're still finding the groove now. And I think when that line's really humming and going, this Sabres team's really hard to beat.
Yeah, I think the situation that they may be able to get out of with now Vinnie Hinnie being sent to waivers and hasn't come out. I haven't seen that he's been claimed or not claimed yet. I guess I haven't been on Twitter as much as I normally am. But with that said, I think that situation might actually be affecting the team mentally. Like, I think they're just not able to be as sort of used to the normal way of how things go on the day-to-day for them. I feel like there's guys constantly, maybe there's some talk in the locker room of like, oh yeah, I'm going to Rochester again. Haha. Like, and you're not, but like you kind of are. And I think this situation has been a little bit taxing on the locker room for sure.
Yeah, before we get to it being Vinnie Hinnie specifically, I mean, when did this, what was it, the return of Yoki Haru was just kind of like when these had to start? And yeah, you look at the timeline, I mean, what was that, 2 weeks ago, about 10 days ago? And that's that recent 5 out of 6. Before that, they were 9-3 in their last 12. So again, I know we've talked all season, Sabres are streaky, they're a young bunch, that's going to happen. But I think that's a fair point that maybe there's a little uncertainty in that locker, maybe more uncertainty than there's been all year, maybe reminiscent of years past where they're lacking the confidence in the actual roster, not knowing who's going to be in the room. Like you said, I'm going down to Rochester, not exactly like a country song that anyone wants to talk about. But with that said, there have been a lot of names thrown around. There's been a lot of frustration. I want to kick it off this with Casey Middlestat. A lot of people have been, theorizing like find some way to get him off the team. Are you happy, quote unquote happy? Because I think we like Vinny and what he brings to the locker room. Not intern Vinny. We really like him. but Vinnie Hinnie, I think we like, his overall presence in the locker room. Obviously, the team loves him for the culture. Are you happy that it was Hinostroza that ended up being cut here, Gatesy, out of the pool of players that might have been applicable?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we all loved Hinostroza's game and kind of that speed and, how much he worked for this team. But unfortunately, he was the odd man out. If you look at the lineup, there's a lot of young players who should be getting that ice time to continue their development. And, just the way this lineup fell, you looked at fourth line too, you have Okposo and Gergensons, two guys that have been on this team, veteran leaders. And unfortunately for Hinostroza, the only way he was getting in the lineup was, scratching some young players, which probably isn't the best for the Sabres for the long term.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, I like Vinnie Hinostroza enough to put him even on my the Sabres fantasy team that we did, right? So I thought this would have been a player that had been in the lineup more regularly, and he just really hasn't been, which is sort of a shame in that there are players on this roster, to take a quote from Sean McDermott, there are players on this roster that are not performing up to expectations, that are on maybe different contracts, that we might be able to use their value to get something better. I mean, there's forwards, like you mentioned, maybe an Olofsson, maybe a Middlestat, that we could use them to get us better pieces, better defensive pieces, try to keep some of those goals out of the net. Like you said, Gates, we've allowed a lot of goals against in the past 5-6 games. Not going to win a lot of games like that, even though we can score at that high clip. When that's not happening, you need to get bailed out by your defense, which our defensive core is not capable of doing right now.
And I'm going to go off on a little tangent here because you mentioned Middlestat and Olofsson. Am I crazy, or did it feel like, Middlestat was kind of finding a groove in the Granato system at the end of last year, and that kind of makes the inconsistency so far this year that much more disappointing? I'm trying to look back to his game logs, but did you guys feel that way? I know obviously he scored the goal to end the season last year, RJ's last call, but I'm looking right now. Okay, I may have been making that up a little bit. He only had 4 points or so his last couple games. Or in April, he had 7 points. I guess that's okay for him. But again, yeah, you said it perfectly, Vinny. Basically, those are guys that maybe they could throw out there and get some value from, or as opposed to just, obviously waiving Vinnie Hinnie and maybe sending him down to Chester. But I look at the pool of players. I mean, I look at Krebs, I look at Peterka, I look at Quinn. I want all those guys out there every night. I can't. I know that we talk about the strain of an NHL season, that you need depth, you need stuff like this for when injuries happen. I can't have, at this point, those guys not out on the ice every night. Quinn is an option to score every single time. Krebs is like, you want to talk about Vinnie Hinnie like meaning something to the team. Krebs is a lockdown defender, and he has that bench support. I mean, geez, that fight in Boston basically sealed the deal. But yeah, again, so my point being, I don't know why I'm doing 3 buts, but out of all the players, I'm happy to see it being Vinnie Hinnie because I can't go without those guys any more nights this season. Speaking of, oh my gosh, here he is. It's Dwayne O'Mania.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
Dwayne, jumping in here. Crossing Swords Pod.
Yeah, I was able to get in just in time, before you guys cut loose. Just got home from work, getting ready for a big night tonight. A big part of my childhood. Pretty excited.
Okay. Well, hey, this is queued up perfect because we've gotten through it. We've been talking about the streakiness, Dwayne. Real quick, with Vinnie Hinnie getting waived, are you happy with that decision given the paper shuffle they've been playing?
It frees up a spot. Was it announced if he'd been claimed or not? Did he clear waivers?
Not yet.
He cleared, I'm pretty sure.
I'm assuming he'll probably clear if he hasn't already. Definitely a good body
we're
to have.
Recording this at 3:40, so just in case it happens in the next hour or two.
No, I mean it's a good body to have in Rochester, for sure. So, and it clears up that roster spot needed to carry 3 goalies. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think he did more with opportunity last year than he has this year, which is why he hasn't been in the lineup very often. But, when he was given chances this year, he did take advantage of it. So when you have guys like Jack Quinn and JJ Paterka in the lineup, all fighting to stay in the lineup on the regular, guys like Vinnie Hinnie, as cool stories as they might be, they kind of, they get left by the wayside. And in this case, he did. So.
Seriously, it's you hate to see him go, but I'm glad we don't have to watch Krebs, Quinn, Paterka leave.
Exactly.
Let's go around the horn here. Actually, speaking of this move, and then we'll get into today, tonight, all it means to Sabres fan and more. 30 seconds each. Let's put you all in GMKA's shoes. You've waived Vinnie Hinnie, so you've kind of relieved, needing to make a move every day. Let's start with Dwayne, go Gatesy, and then Vinnie. 30 seconds. What would you do from between here and the deadline?
Starting with me?
Yep.
Okay. I've been a big advocate of two positions, center and a true top four defenseman. Whether if it's, I know Jacob Chikrin's name gets thrown around a lot, but I wouldn't mind a guy like Joel Edmondson out of Montreal. You get him at a crazy good price. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Another guy would be, many might disagree with me, but Tyler Myers out of Vancouver. He's got 1 year left on his deal and only $1 million. I think he'll be in the trade block this year as well. And then in terms of the center, the biggest name out there, but unlikely, would be Bo Horvat. But that would have to be a sign and trade type situation. But yeah, I think they definitely need to address center for sure. Because if we're, since we're talking about the days of Ryan Miller, one of the things that made those teams so great was having four lines that could score, and that all started with the center position. And your Derek Roy in those years was your third line center.
Yeah, you're using a cheat code when you got Roy Niner at
exactly.
At
and
the 3C, for sure.
You don't have that type of consistency down the middle. I mean, outside of your top line, everything after that is inconsistent at best. Lately, he kind of seems like it's been the Tyler Yost line. You would hope that the kid line, carries their own weight and could consistently be the answer as your second line, but it's not always the case. And that's where I think Buffalo really struggles, is if that first line isn't clicking, things aren't think you aren't going to win essentially. I don't think the biggest need is in net right now. I think building everything in front of your goalie is.
Okay. GM Gatesy, between now and March, what are your plans besides booking Cancun?
I mean, it's really hard to argue with Dwayne O'Mania there. Something that I've noticed too is just that third pairing defensive unit, it's kind of been of a carousel this season, but it's been a pretty bad carousel to watch. I mean, you got Jacob Bryson at a -16 right now, the worst on the team, and that's kind of really been hurting this Sabres squad. You got that top four of you got Dahlin, Samuelson, Power, and then kind of who's ever left. And when those four aren't on the ice, it's normally bad news for Buffalo. Puck stuck in their end, not getting a lot of offense out of it. And if they can get a guy in who can at least lock down that third pairing where it's not, giving up at least a goal a game from them, that'll be huge for this team. That's maybe could be one less goal a game given against. And with how close some of these games have been, those are some wins that Sabres team could desperately need if they're trying to make a push here. Last, couple months left of the season.
Intern Vinny, take those question marks out. Give me the answers. What would you do?
Yeah, I think the answer is just to build a more well-rounded team. I mean, you look at the way we talked about this a little bit last episode. The contract situation is pretty good right now. You've got Tage, your best player, probably. You could argue Dahlin. That's semantics, but you've got really good contracts right now. You need to take advantage of that wiggle room with your cap, right? You want to be able to take advantage of that so you can make some moves to try to take some chances to put your team in a better position to win and make them more well-rounded. I'm okay with allowing a team to score 3-4 goals on us, from time to time, but there's going to be days where we need to only allow 1 or 2, and I think we don't have the D-core that can do that right now. So I think GM Kevin Adams needs to go out and get us some defensemen that can play on a pairing with Owen Power, provide him some relief, so he doesn't have to go out there with I'll use the word burden of carrying Henry Jokiharju, who might be having a bad night more often than not. So that's the biggest problem right now, is just providing some relief there and then that can translate up to the forwards once you have that confidence. If they play loose and only score 2 goals, well, maybe your defense only allows one night. You got to make the team more well-rounded.
Love that. I mean, obviously, again, that's a problem that has plagued the Sabres throughout the drought. Who could forget the start in 2018 when you had the Pominville, Skinner, and Eichel line? Everyone was going nuts. They were like, a top line in hockey. And yeah, you need consistency, all 4 lines, especially, obviously just to qualify for the playoffs and be above a 500 team, especially when you get to the playoffs and those matchups really start mattering. And speaking of mattering, let's face it, it's been a tough decade. There's been times where it feels like the Sabres haven't mattered. But when you go back a decade, it was about Ryan Miller. He was the only one carrying the Sabres. It is all over social media tonight. Ryan Miller night, number getting put in the rafters. I know one man in here is saying it better be done the right way or else I'm going to be furious. Dwayne, let us kick it off. Try and keep it under 20 minutes, but memories of Miller and the first things that come to mind and looking back at some of these things getting mentioned.
I'm just thankful that this will be the high point of the season. This was expected to be the high point of this season, but this team has been able to give us a lot of high points, right? Like at the start, when the schedule came out and you heard that this night was going to happen, that you're circling that date and you're like, that's going to be the best night of the season, 100%. I'm happy that this team, has given us a lot more than what we originally expected. So, here's to that. But I think that you're going to have a lot of that early 2000s, late 2000s alumni in the house. I know that, I spoke to Andrew Peters earlier today, and he's going to be down there with, I'm assuming, a lot of those guys. I think that's what will make the night special. And that's what didn't, when Hasek had his number retired, he didn't have a single, outside of Rob Ray, who was the biggest reason he's there is because, he worked for the team. But, all the players that he played with, they nobody was present. And they dropped the ball big time there. And I expect them to do better, especially, after RJ night last season, how much they hit that out of the park. I fully expect, honestly, the most polarizing player you've had in the last 2 decades. And that's with a guy like Jack Eichel, who, played for your team for 5 seasons. I think that you're going to do right by him tonight. And I can't wait because he deserves it. He's probably, top 3, top 4 best players ever to don a Sabres sweater. It's hard to argue Gilbert Perreault and Hasek. Some people would interchange them 1 and 2, but I think right there, Ryan Miller would fall as the number 3. He owns every single record in the Sabres record book. For goaltenders. At one point in his career, he was the greatest goalie in the world. 1 MVP of the Olympics, silver medal, Vezina Trophy. List goes on and on of his accomplishments. And I still believe to this day, barring injury, a Stanley Cup would have been in Buffalo in 2006.
So it's easy to forget going into 2006 too. Like, he wasn't the surefire starter. You're looking at he had 18 career starts coming into that season. Obviously, he plays 48. Look at those first 2 years as we just look at some stats. 70, 30, and 9. Wins are kind of a goalie stat. I know wins aren't a QB stat, but wins are, a goalie can steal a game, as they often say. Yeah. I'm looking at that 2009-2010 season though. My goodness, a 2.22 with 69 games played.
Yeah,
Are you serious?
I remember at the end of that season, he even made comments too about how tired he was at the end of the year. Going into to that playoff run. He played a lot of games, man. He carried that, especially those post-Briere Drury teams. He carried a lot of the load on his back himself. And he took a lot of shit too. During the Jonas Enroth controversy, where people thought Enroth should have been the starter over. I think weren't people wearing shirts too? Like, it was during the whole Twilight thing. Team Enroth, Team Miller. I'm pretty sure there were shirts made.
All I know is that by the time the early 2010s came around, the whole fan base was definitely delusional off of that mid 2000s run for sure.
But
because you look at, I mean, I remember like there was not outrage when we got rid of Miller. There should have been outrage.
yeah, and there should have been, and not to mention that not just that, but there was so much other stuff that came after the Miller trade.
By the way, get rid of. He was with the team for 12 years. It's not like they just cast him
the
aside.
Pat LaFontaine controversy, how he was ushered out of the organization, the rumors that surrounded that, and then just like the constant losing, just the neglect of the fans on and everything on and off the ice. The product just took a nosedive, and it all kind of started once that era of players it ended, right? I think the last player standing from that era might have been Drew Stafford. It was Miller, Breer and Drury were the first to go. And then I think Gaustad was traded, and, Vanek was traded, Roy was gone. I think Stafford was the last guy standing. I remember the night he was traded when they healthy scratched Miller and everyone had kind of expected him to be gone. I remember Drew Stafford crying in the post-game interview about the whole thing. And that's really when everything truly started to go everything downhill. If it wasn't the Breer Drury, when they left, it was definitely that, because everything, the product on and off the ice just took a complete nosedive. So Ryan Miller meant everything to this fan base. He really did, whether people want to admit it or not. The guy was a very humble human being. He did a lot for the community. You'll hear a lot about that tonight. I remember the Catwalk Foundation that he had, those shows he used to put on. You don't see that in the community anymore, at least amongst the Sabres, like in terms of, players giving back the way he did. He was the last one to really do it. And
I think the thing too, I think the players do have organizations to give back, but I think the thing you're really saying too is you would see highlights from those events, and every Sabre would be there. Every Sabre would be participating. That's kind of what you have going on with the Bills right now, and you definitely, even though you do have a new group that's kind of still gelling, you just don't see it as much with the Sabres. But that's what you got to get back to. I mean, that's what they talk about when they talk about, like locker room vibes, things like that. I mean, you've seen it with the Sabres during their win streaks, but it has to build in the consistency and that DNA.
Exactly. And, it was for that era with Miller, it was just, people were hyped even when the team wasn't performing, people were still hyped to go to games. Because you knew you had one of the greatest goalies in the league still in net, a guy who truly, genuinely cared about the community. And like I said, you'll see a lot of that stuff tonight, obviously, and a lot of the highlight packages I'm sure they'll put together. And even still to this day, when they drafted Owen Power, they had a specific narrated Ryan Miller video package for that, where he talked about the city. I know that was shared a lot this morning. You'll see it's going to be a lot of fun, man. And to really live those memories.
I mean, we were getting a Buffalo athlete in a commercial in the 2000s.
Your mama saw ugly, stole boomerang, and never came back.
Your mama's so ugly, the plastic surgeon sued her.
Your mama's so ugly, they renamed Halloween Yo Mama Weed.
Your mama's so ugly, she made a mime screen.
Ni mama hao show yang chong ya ke le.
Unbelievable. But yes, I mean, like just shit like that. I mean, Ryan Miller was on the map, and that was at a time, truthfully. Like, I know it's kind of more mainstream now, especially because the contracts are split. You got the NHL on ESPN, things like that. That was when the NHL was on OLN and Versus. So the NHL was definitely at its downswing as far as, coverage and everything. So to get this Ryan Miller and the Slug in a commercial was pretty crazy. But let's go into against some memories. I know we're obviously talking about what a great guy he was, everything like that, teammate, everything. Gatesy, Vinny, what do you guys got as far as Miller memories?
I feel like every time I thought about Ryan Miller memories, like the first thoughts in my mind were always sad ones, whether it's, the Winter Classic, the gold medal game, his playoff, series enders, even like his last practice in Buffalo, it's just him stretching at center ice by himself. It's just a core memory in my mind as a child. But there's so much he did off the ice. Like, I don't know if this will pick up on camera, but when I was a little kid, after the game, we went by the locker room. He was the only guy that stopped by, said hi to us, and
bring it back up again. Let's see a young Gatesy. Oh my God! Look at that stick work.
Look at that. Started at a young age, right there.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I got the hair from. Is that Ryan Miller encounter right there? But it's just the small things like that he brought so much to the Buffalo community on the ice, but even more off the ice. Like you guys are saying, seeing him at events, stuff like that. And the fact that he's still in Buffalo now, and like, I don't know if you read his Players Tribune article that just came out, but calls Buffalo like home to him. It's you can see it's where he grew up too. Like when he started with the Sabres, he was probably his early 20s, and he was there over 10 years. That's a big part of Buffalo, and the fact that he still wants to be around here. When he came back for RJ night, such a big deal. And you know, it's going to be sad seeing that 30 go up in the rafters and kind of realize that, you know, those days are long behind us.
We got the alert. I don't know if this, I mean, I'm assuming this can't be for the full game. This has got to be warm-ups, right?
Oh,
the
all wearing
30 patch.
Miller
Okay,
patches.
I thought they were going all numbers.
They might wear. I'd imagine they'd wear that for the game.
Yeah. I'm
like
sorry.
that.
I thought they changed all their numbers that they're 30
Oh.
patch. I was gonna say that would make it a little tough on the line.
Dan would be losing his mind.
Passes it to Miller. Throw it over to Miller. They're sprinkling it to Miller.
I have to imagine RJ will probably be one of the guys speaking during this thing too.
Yeah, I mean, there's
It'd be a
just so
mess.
many classic Miller calls.
Yeah.
And then again, just going through the memories. Sometimes I forget it, but you know, obviously it's you know, you want to think about those 05, 06, 06, 07 teams. At the same time, it's kind of sad to do so because you know how close they were and how good they were.
I can find it.
But Joe DiBiase shared this stuff. I completely forgot that when they lost to the Senators in that 07 series, in that OT, Miller made like a diving paddle save, which basically was like season on the line, game on the line, and just making a save that's like an ESPN top 1 on like any day of the week. So it's pretty incredible. Ivy, what do you got as far as your Miller mems?
Yeah, so I'm going to share a memory. I mean, I have the same memories everyone else has. I mean, Miller was on the Sabres team that got me into playing hockey. He is one of the players that, for my generation, will sort of cement themselves as a player of memory that, you know, will tell future generations about, like, you know, like Hasek was and like Perot was for your earlier Sabres fans and my dad. So this is a player that I got a chance to grow up and watch and enjoy and be impressed by on a nightly basis. And really, I just remember being so mad that Lucic ran him because to me, Ryan Miller was like our guy and you don't touch him, right? And when that happened, I was irate, as should have been everybody else on the ice. And that was, I mean, we talk about the curse of Milan Lucic, and that was maybe the point where everything went downhill after that. But I do want to share a quick story from a friend of mine named Griffin Della Penna, who is going to be there at the game tonight. He works with me at Canisius College, and he told me a story about Ryan Miller yesterday. And he when he was younger, he was receiving treatment for cancer at Roswell. And when he was really young, Ryan Miller was one of the few players that would show up on a regular basis. Ryan Miller was like the guy that always showed up. Now, I had a cousin that was also receiving treatment at the same time, a little bit younger, and Pat Coletta and Ryan Miller were the two guys that were always there. And Miller sort of made that a thing for the entire Sabres organization. Griffin recalled that on multiple occasions, Ryan Miller would show up before games, after games, say hi, come into the hospital, you know, stop and sign autographs and talk and have actual conversations and create relationships with these people in general, the families, the kids and the adults, everything. And he created that as a tradition, if you will, for the Sabres to go out and do that in the community. So it seems like he was an integral figure in starting that. And we mentioned that just a couple of minutes ago. And that speaks not only to his character as an individual, but how he as a person sort of meshed so well with this Buffalo community. And I think that's another reason why people loved him so much, aside from him being one of, if not the best goalie in the NHL for a little while he was playing for our team. So just a great guy and well deserving of this. And I'm excited to see how everybody celebrates him tonight. He certainly deserves it.
Seriously, cannot wait to celebrate number 30 tonight. Looking through some of his stuff as well. You know, this name like felt like it was like, you know, I remembered it. It was a lost memory. The Steadfast Foundation. I mean, I just hadn't heard about him recently, but yeah, he's heavily involved with them as well as the catwalk.
He would do that one catwalk thing. There were some. You said that
catwalk for charity.
Yes, catwalk for charity. I wasn't sure if it was specific to a certain charity that was in the name, but you know, it'd be a different theme every time. I remember, you know, it was like an 80s.
Oh, the boys were loving that.
Yeah, and you'd have the whole team in there participating. And just one thing I wanted to share too is probably one of my favorite things I have Sabres wise. I mean, I have a lot. I mean, I have one of the original Sabres that, you know, were introduced to fans when the team came into the league in 1970. But I think this is probably one of my favorite things I do have is when the Sabres in 06-07, the whole year they did like a picture book called Sabres in Traffic. And I remember sitting outside of what was called then the Pepsi Center. Now it's the Northtown Center. But I was there with my then girlfriend waiting because we knew the team wasn't practicing at the arena. And one by one, the Sabres would, pull up. This was when they were getting ready to make their 06-07 run, when they won the President's Trophy. And Marty Baron had just been traded. So we had Ty Conklin and Dinas Zubris. It was like their first week with the team. And they were coming in one by one. And then Zubris and Ty Conklin, they didn't really take the whole, like the fans being there very seriously. I remember Conklin made a comment. He goes, he was signing something. I think he's even signed this book. He goes, oh, yeah, he signed to the back of it. He goes, oh, how long till this gets on eBay? I'm like, I'm not selling this on eBay. And then Zubris like, hey, do you guys mind if I get you guys after? And I remember my girl he goes, you realize we've all been sitting here for like 3 hours. You can sign an autograph for like 10 people, man. It's like it was kind of like a culture shock for them. They didn't understand it, like how diehard this fan base was. And I remember Miller signed. Well, like he waited. He signed the most out of anybody before and after. I remember this one guy cut a kid in line, and he already signed for him. And Miller looks at him and goes, "Dude, are you fucking serious?" He goes, "You just cut like a 12-year-old." Cut in front of a 12-year-old. He goes, "Get the hell out of here. I already signed twice for you." And my jaw dropped. I'm like, that is awesome. But then he literally sat there and for another half an hour just continuously signed for people. It was like this book right here. It was like Sabres in Traffic. And I remember he signed it a couple times for me. But that day, just right in that moment, like how much he cared about making sure he gave those young kids his time rather than sign another autograph for some, 20-year-old schmuck. It was pretty cool to see that side of him, that humane side. And going back to what Vinny said about the Roswell thing, it reminds me a lot of Pat LaFontaine. LaFontaine did a lot of the same stuff before there was ever social media. He used to sneak into children's hospitals just to hang out with kids, and he still continues that charity work today. With cancer, pediatric cancer patients and whatnot. So it reminds me a lot of that stuff, man. And you don't get very, athletes that are, have that much of a humane side to them. And I think we were lucky to have two in Patty and Ryan. And I hope that, with the group of guys we have now, somebody kind of takes over, takes the reins for that, whether it is like an Alex Tuck or maybe it's, a Rasmus Dahlin down the line. Somebody takes the reins and starts taking that seriously, because it does go a long way in terms of, the way you're remembered in this community.
Seriously. And hopefully we're all leaving Miller Night, whether you're in the arena or watching on TV, saying what a great way it is to be in Buffalo.
Thinking in there how great it is to be in Buffalo. It's great to be in Buffalo.
Folks, make sure you're subscribed on SoundCloud, Spotify, all of them, Apple, because we are rolling. The Crossing Swords is rolling. We're hoping to get to a playoff run, but tonight we will just take a win over the New York Islanders. Quick last-second prediction. I got a UPL shutout, very fitting for Miller Night. 3-0 Sabres, 3-0 on the scoreboard. Folks, thanks for tuning along. Thanks for our panel, intern Vinny, Gatesy, Dwayne Omania, and myself. Let's have a great night, and let's go Sabres.